Welcome to Screenwriter's Rewatch. We've diverted again from the IMDb's top 250 film list. So, the story behind this really is that Alex and I were all ready and set to review The Deathly Hallows Part 2. And then we thought, well, we can't really do that without mentioning Part 1. And then there was this announcement from Warner Brothers about making the new Harry Potter series, which is due for release sometime around 2025. And we got a little bit overexcited and just thought, well, do you know what? Let's just do them all. So we hope you'll stay with us through the next 7 episodes with our full length discussions over on the podcast. Thank you for joining me, Alex. What an epic journey we are about to embark on.
I know, right?
It's
Well, 8 films.
Well, technically, at 8 films, we'll
Yeah.
see how we go with part 1 and 2, and whether we need to split them. I think maybe we might. So yeah, maybe 7 or 8 episodes. So I'm part of the Harry Potter generation, and I remember the book burnings and the overnight queues outside Waterstones. And the first Harry Potter movie actually spoiled my plans for work experience in my local cinema. Though, because I've never been one to follow a trend, I didn't read the books until much later and only saw the film in this. The only film I saw in the cinema was the last installment, and I bawled my eyes out when it finally dawned on Harry that he needed to die. Spoiler alert, sorry if you've not seen it. And it's not often that a series like this comes around where the world is so beautifully created. It's kind of like a once in a generation experience if you think about things like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and that kind of thing. So, though I love Harry Potter films for the visual magic it stirs, and a bit less so for the formulaic approach to the story, and perhaps a little bit less said about Lord of the Rings, the better. Alex, what is it about this franchise for you?
See, again, I was with you. I remember the books coming out. I started to read the books when they first were coming out. Um, I didn't get very far. I got a bit bored. But I watched every film in the cinema up until I want to say the Deathly Hallows. But yeah, I was very much in that moment in the sort of Potterite thing. I really want to go to the studios and do the whole Harry Potter experience. But yes, the world is fascinating. I don't think it's as rounded out as people think it is. I think when you actually start digging into it, it unravels very, very quickly. Something we can talk about more when we get into the actual thing. But visually, it's beautiful. It really does give us a world sort of that we haven't seen in a long time. Star Wars is obviously a big one when it comes to this as well. It's very much sort of upon that hero's journey. You could say possibly the first film has the hero's journey, but I think almost all 7 of them really follow that path of the hero's journey all the way through. So each step sort of comes into each film sort of one way or another. But yes, no, the first one, the 2001 film, directed by Christopher Columbus. Obviously, speaking of Lord of the Rings, it's the same year as Lord of the Rings came out, which is very unusual. 2 massive book adaptations coming at the same time. But yes, Christopher Columbus, the Spielberg protege, taking on this film, sort of recruiting the biggest English cast known to man outside of like a Gosford Park or something, and putting them onto the big screen. Um, I felt this film. I It's really hard because I really enjoy this film, even though it has many problems. But it's really fun, really enjoyable. Got a great cast. I think Daniel Radcliffe as starting off is really interesting as an actor, and he really comes into his own throughout the films. You've got Rupert Grint really sort of bringing a lot of the comedy in it. Really sort of a lot of the comedy hangs on him, and I think he nails it completely. So Emma Watson really sort of works Hermione does such a beautiful way of bringing that character onto the screen. We think these actors are 11, 10 or 11, sort of, as they're making this film, maybe 12, and they have this sort of real maturity on screen, which I don't think you have a lot with a lot of child actors, and I think that really helps make this film as popular as it was and is. I think they are the real crux of it. The late Robbie Coltrane again also really sort of adds a lot of the humor moments to this film. It's got some great one-liners, some great lines in the film that have come synonymous with just life now. You're a wizard, Harry. Uh, when he breaks down the door and he's like, "Oh, sorry about that," which is interesting because I've been listening to the book, and actually in the book it's not as funny, it's not as fun, and it's not as sort of dramatic. It's a lot more flat, which is interesting. Obviously, if you take the adaptation from a book, and you've got so much to do in so little time, that you actually can pace those scenes that little bit more. But I think it does a really interesting take on that. But we will discuss more in the thing. But I enjoyed it. I like Harry Potter, despite of its flaws.
I think it's one of those sort of stories that if we talk about stories as the whole journey that Harry Potter goes on across these eight sort of films, um, it's quite a grown up storyline. I think when I think of films for children around that time, and in books, well, some books definitely, but when I think about films of that time, they were either cartoons or they were sort of slapstick. If you think of, Jim Carrey and things like that. So to kind of have one that's actually it's all about children. It's from the child's perspective. It's got some grown up themes in there. It's not afraid to show grown up tension, but at the same time it's playful and it's appropriate. So I think perhaps this is why Harry Potter is such a universally watched film. I'm not sure how well the books are read amongst adults, but it's definitely, I think it's a fantasy world that's just primed for all manner of escapism. And I think it has that tangible effect that the worlds that Star Wars creates, the worlds that J.R.R. Tolkien created, and right from when he wrote the books, not necessarily when the films came out. So yeah, I thought that I can see how adults really sort of engross themselves into this, and why they still are 23 years later, 22 years later, which makes me feel very old. Um, anyway, we will get stuck into more of the discussion over on our podcast. So I hope you will join us over there. Just search Script Department wherever you get your podcasts, or follow the link in the description of this video, and let's get stuck in. We'll see you there.